Thank you for choosing this Analyst Insight podcast from the Information Security Forum. I'm Richard Absalom, Senior Research Analyst at the ISF, and today I will be talking about securing containers with my colleague, Principal Analyst Paul Holland.
Hello there, I'm Paul Holland, the author of the Securing Containers Keeping Pace with Change report that's coming out soon.
As you said, your new report looks at how to secure containers. Can you give us a hint of what is in it?
Yes, I certainly can. So obviously I've been researching into containers and the way that they're increasing popularity, mainly due to how they help the DevOps teams and teams that are using agile methodologies for development. And with that, it's key that you use people, process and technology to be able to form a proper security solution around the containers.
People, process and technology. Are any of those more important than the others, or which is the most important?
I think really it's all of them. There isn't one that you can use on its own. I don't feel there's one that's more important than the others. You need to use them all at 100%. And I know that sounds odd. People will go, you can't have 300%. But what I mean by that is that they all need to be working effectively. So you have to have all of the people elements working, all of the process elements working, and all of the technology working. You can have the best technology solution, but without the people to implement it, and without the processes for them people to follow, the technology won't be effective. So they all need to work in conjunction with each other and all to their maximum capacity. And if you can do that, you'll build an effective solution. The technology itself can do a good job with default settings, but if you don't have the right processes to set it up just for your organization and to just secure the elements that you want, it's not going to work very well. It's not going to be the best solution you can have. And obviously that you need the people in your organization to be able to perform those processes and to get the technology working to the right amount. So it's vital that they're key to each other and they all work together so you can get a really decent solution out of it all.
Let's start at the beginning. Think about what are containers. So if we think about how they fit into that general virtualization landscape, what makes containers different? And then what are the processes and technologies, as you've talked about, that are involved? And how can people actually make those work?
So really the containers are similar to the standard virtual machines and a little bit like serverless computing. They sit about halfway between those two options that a lot of organizations will already be used to. They're a kind of a lightweight virtual machine, so they don't need an extra operating system. So you don't need to install a whole Linux environment or a whole Windows server environment to run your container and the application that's contained in it, which is part of the reason for their popularity. They're lightweight, they use less CPU, memory, the RAM, than a standard server would do. So with a lot of organizations moving into the cloud, it means that they can use cloud and save some money at the same time, because they're using less resources. And obviously within the cloud, you tend to pay per the resources you're using. With the way containers work, it's easy to just open them and execute them, run them just as you need them and shut them down when you're not using them. So again, that reduces the amount of resources, because again, a standard Windows server will take quite a long time to boot up before it's active, before it can be useful. That's where the container environment sits, in that application space. So you can create lots of different applications to build a larger application, which is sometimes known as microservices, where you have a container and its application within it running each separate part of that larger application. So it could be, for example, that you could have a container that runs a search function. You could have another container that runs the user management for the users that connect up to the system. And then you might have another one that manages the actual database and how that database gets updated. You can build and build and build as many different functionalities into it as well. You could just add in a calendar application into your larger microservice environment. They've got a lot of uses and the benefits that you gain with it. So they're a really useful little tool.
This all sounds brilliant so far. So why do we care from a security point of view? What's the catch?
Unfortunately, there are a few catches with it, but none of them are insurmountable. Because they're that kind of lightweight environment, there's a lot less visibility about what's happening within a container. So where you haven't got the Windows server or your Linux kernel running on it, there's a lot less logs and visibility of what you can see. You can't delve into the Windows logs and event viewer and see what's happening within the container. There's very little of that information in the container itself. But you can get add-ons and things where you can get to that extra login information and provide extra logs. So that's one of the issues you get. Another one is, like I said, one of the big advantages is you can just run the application within a container when you actually need it to be working, because it's reasonably instant in the way it appears, and then turn it off when you don't need it. So obviously that short lifespan means that a lot of the traditional security tools aren't necessarily going to work properly. So an antivirus tool that scans the network for new devices and said, I need to install an antivirus agent on this machine. By the time it's got around to pushing out that agent to the container, it's probably been turned off already. So it doesn't ever get around to installing the antivirus like that. So that short lifespan doesn't help. There's also the fact if you turn a container off, any logs that were stored in the container will be lost because it's just logging whilst it's active. So there's some of the issues that you can get around them. But like I said, there are many different solutions out there that organizations can use to help some of those problems that can arise from a security perspective.
Have you got a couple of examples of those solutions? So I know we've mentioned people, process, and technology. I'd be interested to talk about things that can help from a process point of view, something from a technological point of view, and then how do the people involved in securing this bring that all together?
Yeah, certainly. So from the people's perspective, what the research has shown me is that one of the key, I would say, teams is that you need to talk to is DevOps. It's about developing applications that work in a quick, rapid way. So that is quite often a DevOps team that are doing that development. So they're a key team for security to talk to, get to know, and be able to help and support them so that DevOps understand what security is, why it's so important to the organization and to them as individuals, so that they can start to build security into the containers and the code that they're writing. It's about helping them understand it, empowering them with the right knowledge and skills so that they can create secure containers. So from a process perspective, there's quite a number of different things they can do, but one of the ones that I think is probably most interesting and can have some great benefits is the security patterns. So that's a list of controls and a list of steps that the DevOps team can go through when creating that container and its application. So it can be quite prescriptive. Security patterns, they can take quite a while to create, but it's one of those things you put that effort in up front, and then there's massive benefits out of it for a long time afterwards. You'll save yourself an awful lot of time in the long run by investing that time up front. So if you can get the DevOps teams to use those security patterns, you can help them understand how they're built. They can create their own security patterns to help themselves as they move forward. But from a technology perspective, one of the things that I quite liked and leads into the example earlier is added coded security elements in. So there's different ways security can help include code that's put in by the DevOps team that are in those container images. So for example, code snippets. So these are literally pre-designed bits of code that perform a specific task. So you could actually add a code snippet that says, right, go and grab the antivirus agent and install it on the container. Yeah, rather than having to wait for the process to happen from the automated side on the other side. As soon as the container starts up, it says, right, I need antivirus on here. I'll go and install it and run a scan immediately just to make sure that I'm safe at my starting point. It could be that you add a coded security element that goes and checks on the internal repository server to see if there's any new patches that have been added since the last time the container image was created, and it can automatically patch itself at the beginning. So those coded security elements, like the code snippets, can really help you get a good start when the container engine is formed up into that actual container and the application that it's got within it.
Yeah, so lots of interesting stuff in there in terms of the technology that people are going to be able to use. This sounds like it's not necessarily always going to be our listeners who are in the InfoSec teams who are going to be directly responsible for securing containers. It sounds like they really need to work with DevOps and hopefully DevSecops teams to make this happen.
That's absolutely the case. Yeah, I think there needs to be a bit of a shift in that responsibility, like you said there. So information security need to kind of divest the responsibility for security into other teams. When we're talking about containers and development, then DevOps and hopefully DevSecops is the best place to divest that responsibility into. Information security still need to be accountable for the security of the whole environment and security of the organization, but they need to share out the responsibility as wide as they can. And this helps build on that security is everyone's responsibility. Information security need to help the whole organization to think about security throughout the whole life cycle of everything they do, but certainly with regards to the application development life cycle and the containers life cycles, including forming up DevOps teams and getting security to make them fully DevSecops teams, is something that's really important. And they really need to empower those teams, help them understand it, help give them the skills, the knowledge, be there to support them the whole way through. And the security patterns can really help that, these coded security elements, building these gold container images so that they know they're safe and secure from the get-go. As you start up the container, you're quite confident that what you've got is a solid base that's already secure when you're starting. So it is about making sure that the people that need to be responsible for the development and security are doing that as well, whilst remaining accountable in the InfoSec team so that they can all work together. And I think this will provide benefits as well for the organisation as a whole moving forward. Like I said, it helps to push that security as everyone's responsibility. And if the other teams within organisations see that information security are helping and supporting other teams, and they're showing them the way to go and saying, we're here to help you, we're here to support you, we want to do everything properly, and they can see some success happening in DevOps, then hopefully it will push to that wider remit in other teams as well. They'll be able to see what they can do and how everything can work.
Yeah, I think that sounds like an ideal situation. Maybe using containers as a test bed for some cultural shift throughout the organization would be a good way of looking at it. So finally, could you give us an answer in a nutshell? Why should ISF members go and download this paper?
Well, for me, I think it's certainly, if you're an organisation that's using containers or has had a big shift to the cloud, then obviously this paper can really help you understand what's going on under the hood of containers, why you need to care and worry about them, and gives you some really good hints and tips and suggestions on how you can make that a secure environment. We've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, the adoption of containers within a production environment has gone from 23% up to 90%, which is a massive shift in the amount of people that are using it. So we need to make sure that we're understanding the new technologies that we're using. And with DevOps liking to do things quickly, because that's what the team's there to do, information security need to adjust so they can work quickly. And I think there's certainly elements in the paper where we show how information security can adjust their approach. And a lot of that approach is working closely with the DevOps team. So if you've got containers, if you're using the cloud, even if you're not sure you've got them, download the paper. At least you understand what containers are, and then you might be able to discover that you have got them within your environment.
Great, thanks, Paul. Well, hopefully this will encourage lots of people to download and read the paper. It is a briefing paper, so it's going to be pretty short, won't take up too much of your time, but has lots of valuable insights in it. So thanks for your time today, Paul. And thanks everyone for listening. You can find more podcasts on the ISF podcast channel or at securityforum.org, where you can also learn more about ISF research, tools, and guidance.